Hello, I'm Glen McKie, and in this video we're going to be looking at box and whisker plots. So what are they? Sometimes they're often just called a box plot, so recognize those two words so that you can use them interchangeably. And it's a graph essentially, and it's helping us to visualize the spread of a data set in particular. So it's created using a 5-number summary of a data set. You might look at a previous video where I've talked about range and interquartile range. And so there's 5 numbers that we need to be able to draw a box plot. So what are those 5 numbers that we need? We need a minimum, a Q1, a median, a Q3, and a maximum. Technically, as I've mentioned in a previous video, these are the numbers that represent the beginning and the ends of each quarter. Quartile is similar to the word quarter. So you could call minimum Q0 if you like, but it's a more commonly recognized word to use minimum. Then there's Q1. This is technically Q2, but median again is an average, and that's a word that we recognize for the value that's in the middle of an ordered data set. Q3, and then maximum would be your Q4, but again, maximum is a more recognizable word. And so, yeah, these are the values that are important, and this is called a 5-number summary. If you're ever asked to work that out, these are the numbers that you would need to show. So this video is pitched for people using their graphics calculators, so make sure you're playing along at home to be able to do some examples. Okay, so this is how they would get represented. Essentially, you would sort of draw 5 dots and connect the dots, so to speak. Notice, though, that we don't draw a line through from the minimum to the maximum. You have to represent that middle 2 quarters with a box. Hence this part's the box plot, and then these are sometimes called the whiskers, if you like. Now, this part I find quite interesting, that there is 25% of the data in each sections. But I found students sometimes get a bit confused by that because they're like, but hang on, each section is a different length or width, so how can they represent the same amount? Let me put this in context with an actual example. And I suppose if you're thinking that there's 100 pieces of data, 25 lie here, 25 there, 25, 25. So this is the number of data in that section. So for example, if we're looking at the heights of Year 11 students, and let's say you had 100 students, have a think about what's actually happening here for the males. 25 of the males are in this quarter, 25 here, 25, 25. What could you say then about this 25? What's happening with those 25 people? It's a shorter section than the others. So the range within that number of 25 people is smaller. There's not as much discrepancy, so to speak. These middle 25 people, this 25, are nearly a similar size. But what about this last quarter, this last quartile? What could you say about the heights of those 25 male Year 11 students? They're a bit more spread out, aren't they? I wonder if there's some quite tall people that are almost outliers, if you like, in that section of 25. Okay, and so how can we use all of this? Box plots are really handy when you have 2 of them. They make much more interesting ways to describe your maths and your statistics when you're comparing things. So in this example, we've got the males and the females. Just a couple of notes here on when you have to draw box plots. So you need titles, saying what you're doing, heights of Year 11 students. You'll need an axis, which has to have a scale on it. You don't have to write every single little number. You might go up by 5s. I would argue we probably need a better scale on here than this. I usually line up at least the 5-number summary that I've got on my scale, and you have to decide each time. You know, you might go up by 1s or 5s or 10s, whatever's appropriate, putting the units for that. And then when you draw the second box plot, 2 options. You can draw it underneath that scale, that axis, or sometimes you might have seen the second one drawn above. So it makes it easy to compare. And always make sure you label which one's which, because if you've got 2 box plots there and you don't know which one's which, it makes it very hard to compare. Okay, how do we get our graphics calculators to draw these for us so then we can take them off the screen and draw them into our books? So you enter the 2 sets of data into the 2 lists there. This is using a Casio calculator. Then from Stat, you would choose Graph, which is F1, and Set, F6. The calculator can actually draw 3 parallel box plots at the same time. That might be useful at some point in time. So going over to some of our setting here, We want to tell it to draw a med box, so a median box plot. F2 we would select there. I'm going to confess to you, med box. I'm not exactly sure what the MED is. That for median? I've never looked that up. Somebody write in the comments and tell us what that means if you've Googled it ahead of time. You might need to scroll, as you can see the arrow bar, which will line up with F6 to select all of your options. So what have we got here? These are quite similar. You'll see that the Stat 1 graph is describing here and Stat 2 graph here. So they're the two lists. Notice everything's pretty much the same. One is list 1, one is list 2. Keep the frequency at 1. Outliers on or off, they should probably be the same. So perhaps a discrepancy there on my part. And you might choose different colours if your calculator can do that, red or blue, or selecting them to be described in different ways so that you know which one is which. Exit out of that, and then you need to tell the calculator, I actually want you to draw them now. So in F4, then you would select drawing on, and then you're ready, and what would they look like? Here we go. As we said, one was red, one was blue. And you can see that the shape that they've got, sometimes in box and whisker plots, we put an end on the whisker there, a little line. You're welcome to do that. Making sure when you now copy that into your books, or, you might not copy this example because you don't know the numbers there, but when you do examples, making sure you have your title, labeling, which one's which, and units along the bottom here with a horizontal axis. And the 5-number summary, yes, you can get from your stat menu that we've been doing in previous videos. You can actually also get it here off the box plot, which is really handy. So what you do is shift F1, and then it's going to bring up a cursor key, which is this sort of not an arrow, a crosshatch thing there. It's not a star. Come on, Anna. I'm not sure what we would call that. A cross, but a straight cross. Anyway, the cursor key. And it will come up on one of the box plots. You would arrow left and right, and it will tell you down the bottom what each thing is. As we know, this is the end of the 3rd quarter, so that's Q3, and the number there is 10. And to get to the other box plot, you would arrow up or down. Okay, I hope that's been helpful for using your graphics calculator for box plots. The next video in this series is about outliers.